Welcome everyone to our inaugural Startup Central Victoria event. We are making history tonight and you are in the room. The Startup Central Victoria project, Lauren, you might like the next slide, is funded by Regional Development Victoria. It's led by the City of Greater Bendigo and resourced by La Trobe University's Innovation and Entrepreneurship team and some amazing partners. But it is for the whole region, and we have so many amazing people that are contributing to this conversation. There are so many wonderful initiatives already taking place, and one of our primary purposes of this project is to build on those that collaboration and build the ecosystem across the region, make it a regional conversation, which is really important. So there will be many additional activities like tonight, supported by industry and community leaders. On the next slide, this evening is the first of our conversations, but I'd like to bring to your attention a couple of really important events coming up. And that is the Hackathon for those that already have a business idea or might get a business idea from tonight's conversation, which is what it's designed to do. You might want to just learn about how to build a business idea in a weekend. It's a pretty intense weekend of learning, but a wonderful opportunity in a team environment supported by mentors and real experts that can help you proceed an idea. So it will be delivered online, high energy, and open to individuals and teams. So it is 15th to the 17th of October, and we really do encourage people to apply for that if they've got an idea they'd really like to scope out, or as I say, just learn how to build a business. This next event is the Accelerator Program. Now, this will be open to aspiring and emerging entrepreneurs. Once again, individuals or teams that are looking to start up or scale up. Very important. You know, it's not just for startups, it's those that might like to take it to a new level, new markets, maybe international export thing, for ideas that are in Central Victoria. So once again, we're aiming it at businesses in the region. And it will be tailored learning with the team from La Trobe and the Australia Asia Technology Incubator. And flexible hours, it's a 12-week program commencing 25th of October. There is a big break over the summer period, so you don't have to stress about cutting into your Christmas or January holidays. And there's only 15 places available. And I really do encourage, if you know of someone or someone in the room is thinking that they would really like to drive their business idea forward or scale it up, now is the time to apply. And just so you know, we will be offering these programs again in 2022. So there will be other opportunities. So here we are to the opportunities forum this evening. We might stop sharing, Lauren, thank you. I would like to acknowledge the generosity of the speakers and chairs for making themselves available. They're not here to come up with all the answers, but to generate discussion and stimulate ideas. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to inspire you. Hold your questions until we get to the chat room, when you can choose what topic you want to go in and have an in-depth conversation with. Okay, so we want you to contribute your ideas too. And we're calling on the collective brains trust of the region for this discussion. We want to come up with some great ideas as a result. Okay, so that is the format for tonight. We have 7 topics. I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and we will proceed. So I hope that's clear to everyone, and just 15 teams, there can be teams. Yep, definitely 15 teams. Thank you. Lauren's already answering all these questions. I'll concentrate on introducing. So first up this evening we have the topic of robotics, and our speaker is Mark Hines, who's the CEO of Hazeldene's, which is just on the outskirts of Bendigo. And Mark very kindly volunteered to lead this conversation. I'll let him introduce. I know he's got some slides. I will let him explain a little bit more about what his involvement in robotics is. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks for that introduction. I think I should say at the outset, I'm not the expert in our business in robotics, but happy to talk to the slides. Before we sort of run through the slides, I think I'll just give us some overview of the opportunities that we see in the region for business startups or for scale up. I'll talk about robotics in a sec, but I think a big focus of our future, both in the short term and medium term, is around being able to produce carbon neutral poultry and most likely other proteins into the future. So I think there's big opportunity for the region to be thinking about biogas and biogas opportunities, a big piece around sustainability on waste, water, and anaerobic digesters and so forth. There's a huge opportunity for the region to position itself and support a lot of large manufacturers and food processors in the food bowl. I think just at a conceptual level, if you look across from sort of Ballarat to Castlemaine to Bendigo, between Mars, KR, Castlemaine and Hazeldene's, there's probably a workforce of around about 15,000 people, and we're exporting probably already to 100 countries around the world. So there's a huge opportunity to keep building on that food bowl. And I think the opportunity is also there to what I call feed the big guys. So as organisations like ours get bigger and bigger and bigger, we need support from local community, local experts in robotics, local experts in drone and farm management, local experts in data management and data mining. A huge part of our business is around traceability of products. So, small and medium-sized organisations that can come in, work under contract for us and build their business literally on our watch is an opportunity that I think people need to really be thinking about. The other thing I would say is innovation, particularly for us. We're happy to support small local businesses and, potentially into the future through Hazeldene Family Foundation, fund businesses that can support the community. So I think there's time for a different approach in the region. I've only lived in Bendigo for 2.5 years, and I think the region sells itself a little bit short, and I think it's probably a mindset change that needs to take place a little bit as well. I'm not going to speak about digital because I know another speaker is talking about that, but as an example, with our robotics, all of our processing plant and equipment runs live 24/7, and all of that data is shared to two sister twin plants, one in Germany, one in Denmark and one in Iceland. And that data is reviewed live every 15 minutes and spat back to our plant in Lockwood. And our robotics is about obviously reducing, manual labour in what can be a labour-intensive industry, but it's actually about using the data to drive our business and drive our business decisions. If I was, 20 and thinking about starting a business in Bendigo, I'd be looking at business analytics, innovation analytics, and sustainability analytics. I think there's a huge opportunity in that space for the region. Robotics in our business obviously is a huge part. For those who don't know, we built a $100 million processing plant on top of the 3 plants that we already have in Lockwood last year. We brought that online during COVID, which was a miracle in itself. But that's not tonight's conversation. I think there's a changing nature in the skill set that Bendigo needs. And I think if somebody was to look at and analyse the changing nature of the skill sets and the mindset around what the region needs, that there's a business opportunity around that as well. And the last one I sort of would talk about at a very high and conceptual level is, and it's not sexy, it's not a startup, but what's the infrastructure that the region needs for the next, 10, 15, 20 years? Because as you attract people who are relocating from Melbourne, and I don't think it's far away before we get people relocating from Sydney and South Australia into the region, and the Bendigo Airport's a big part of that link post-COVID. How do we attract a different skill set to the region? And it will really be a lack of skill sets that prohibit the businesses from growing and starting up in this region. Now, the flip side of that is, of course, we've got two wonderful TAFE colleges here. We've got La Trobe Uni. There's a great public and private school system, and all of that can feed into the workforce and the business force of the future. So I think somewhere across that whole landscape, there's enormous opportunity for the region, and maybe, build on the existing good work that's already there, and then step change the areas where the region could really flourish.
Thank you, Mark. You've given us a lot to think. I think you've taken on just the whole region and every topic known to man. Well done.
Well, I'm not a robotics expert, so I have to speak about something else.
Where you have got help. You will have help in the room, and I'd like to acknowledge the chair of this session will be Windsor Main, who's the site manager at Edlin Foods. Like many industries, they've all looking at robotics and the potential of it, but what are the gaps? So that will be the discussion in the chat room with Windsor and Mark afterwards, if you'd like to really take a deep dive into robotics. So Lauren, we'll just stop screen sharing. Thank you. All right. So our next speaker is, the topic I'll start with first, Digital 100 Gig. Now, this has been an initiative that has had a power of work going on behind the scenes, and it's only just become public. And Mark Jackson's going to lead this discussion. He's strategic relations with Bendigo Telco, and I know you are very familiar with this and hopefully can shed some light on what are the types of startup businesses that could benefit or take opportunity from this digital age. So I'll hand over to you, Mark Jackson. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry, and hello, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to join in the session tonight. So just on startups, a little bit about myself and Bendigo Telco as well, because my role at BT is to lead our digital transformation itself. So the business is actually going through a transformation this year. It's a 20-year-old company, over 10,000 customers across Queensland, New South Wales, Vic and Tas, 80 people in the business, and we are going through our own transformation and thinking of ourselves as a startup. And so as a business, what does it mean to be a startup? You're either creating markets or you are trying to disrupt markets. And we're definitely trying to, as a small regional telco compared to the big players, come up with new models to disrupt the markets that we already play in and to uplift our own capability to be able to play in new markets. And so we do that through thinking about our go-to-market, through our products and through our customer experience. And as part of that product reinvention or productization of ideas, that we now have the ability to take ideas to products much more quickly than we ever could. I think BT, prior to me joining about 12 months ago, had sort of leveled out a little bit over the last 5 years, and we are shaking the business up to be able to flexibly and efficiently take ideas to market. And so we're living the startup mindset. And so the previous comments from Mark around culture of innovation, a culture of successful failure, and those sorts of ideas we actually live on a daily basis as we try to reinvent, redesign a plane that's already in the air, if so to speak. So as part of my role, I'm looking for ideas, but I'm also looking for partnerships, because we see such a huge demand in the market for regional businesses for digital services because of the telecommunications infrastructure. That's the program that Glenn Pomeroy, myself and RDV have been working on. We see the demand in the regions, and once telecommunications infrastructure gets uplifted to the level that it's already at and has been for a long time in the cities, basically the so-called country-city digital divide, the demand for digital skills is very strong, and it's a pent-up demand that it will be released once we solve the communications infrastructure issues within regional areas. And so as part of that, one of the very first things that BT is productising is the so-called 100 Gig City initiative that we've been collaborating on with the city of Bendigo, which is to allow access to some pretty fast fibre that we've had running through the CBD of Bendigo for some time, and really allow productised access to that. And that's been in soft launch for a little while, meaning as a disruptor, we have to also think about disrupting ourselves. And to disrupt ourselves, we have to think about the market. And part of our soft launch is going back to all the customers that were on our fibre and presenting new, much lower pricing to them, for example. So as a startup mentality where we disrupt ourselves on pricing in order to still be in the market, they're the kind of ideas and initiatives that we work through on a daily basis. There's lots more that I can talk about that we are doing around digital, but I can see I'm running out of time. But I guess my shout out is that we love to work with startups themselves. We already are in a couple of different areas around cybersecurity and telecoms itself. And we love good ideas to be incubated through access to our existing customer base, for example, or working through our own productisation of ideas pipeline. So lots more I could talk about, but I just wanted to let people know where we are at, and we can go to the chat rooms later on to have a further discussion.
Thank you, Mark. And obviously you'll have a good understanding of what businesses can capitalise on the digital initiative that's taking place. And it's just it applies to traditional businesses as well as startup businesses. Digital is just such an important part of our every daily business transactions these days. So look forward to hearing some good ideas coming out of that. The chair will be Glenn Pomeroy, who's Economic Development at City of Greater Bendigo. So he will be guiding that conversation along with Mark. Thank you so much. All right. So our next speaker. Now, this is a tough one, I have to say. Supply chain security. The last 18 months has really highlighted a lot of issues regarding supply chain security. And I almost feel like awarding gold medals to the two gentlemen who have agreed to take on this topic, because it is such a big conversation and could apply to just about any sector of the business. So our speaker will be Mick Josie, who's General Manager of Fairbrothers Construction Victoria, and they have a section operating out of Bendigo, but Mick will certainly bring a statewide perspective to this conversation, and he'll be backed up by the chair in the chat room by Paul Chapman from the Australian Turntable Company. So I will hand over to Mick Josie. Thanks, Mick.
Thanks, Kerry. Thanks for the kind introduction. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And thanks for taking the time to attend tonight's forum. A little bit about Fairbrother. Firstly, Fairbrother was founded in Tasmania, a small, humble little company, a mum and dad company. He's 43 years old now and is grown to have over 500 employees and turnover in excess of $300 million across Tas and Vic. In Victoria here, we operate out of Geelong, Warrnambool, and our head office for Victoria is based in Bendigo. So from little things, big things grow. So I work in a very dynamic industry. It's an industry that we really do find energetic, and we're all very passionate about it. I think to further expand off Mark's initial comments around carbon reduction, I think that is the key topic at every platform going forward at the moment. If we look at the way we build things currently, it has changed considerably. We're now building out of timber structures. We're about to build the Bendigo Law Courts out of a timber structure in lieu of concrete. It has been responsibly harvested environmentally there. So, and it's been procured out of Victoria. There is only one facility in Australia that does structural harvesting of timber, and is in its infancy here in Australia, and is a fantastic opportunity, I believe, for this region. Forests, harvests, done again responsibly. I think there's a fantastic opportunity there. Further to that, we see products that are imported constantly. Vertical transport, every lift you hop into has come out of Spain or China. Most of the components within those have come out of Spain and China. No one in Australia actually manufactures vertical transport. So again, great opportunity. But even to bring that down into smaller scale business, there's opportunities in performance products within timber, within joinery, your chairs, the tables, manufacturing, those key items that everyone needs every day. All, again, majority of those products are manufactured out of Asia. And I can hear people already thinking, well, it's the price variance, the cost of labour. Well, I can categorically guarantee you there's been an absolute correction in thinking. 10 years ago, it was all price driven. Now it's around quality, it's around local, and it is around ongoing development of our businesses. The state government sets key targets for all the projects that we deliver. We have to hit local targets. Our projects are measured through local industry development plans, through social procurement, to which we must adhere. So again, local manufacturing is a key, and I believe personally, fantastic business startup opportunities. So yeah, I think again, just in closing, for construction at the moment, it's been a fairly torrid task for the last 18 months. But we have a way forward now with so much opportunity. I've never seen opportunity within Victoria like it is now. There is also skilled trade shortages as well that can be further built on. Electricians, plumbers, concreters, steel fabricators, all of those disciplines require additional workers in them. There's opportunities for business with safety, quality, and environmental focus to expand into commercial construction within those disciplines. Yeah, so if anyone would like to discuss any of those items further, feel free to jump into the chat room with Paul and I later on. Thank you.
Fantastic, Mick. You've really got us excited. I love the optimism, and that is fantastic to hear. And it's right across a number of industries, and I love those examples. So you've inspired me. So well done. Yeah. Okay. So good discussion coming up there with Paul and Mick later on, if you'd like to join that. Now, our next topic, and I think a few people have almost given an introduction to it, circular economy. And I'd like to welcome Emily Jones, who's part of the Circular Economy Business Innovation Centre. And she's going to lead this conversation initially, but later on she'll be joined in the chat room by Scott Bryant, who's our resident circular economy coordinator here in the region, and equally skilled and knowledge. So that will be another great conversation. So I'll hand over to you now. Emily, welcome.
Thank you, Kerry, and thanks everyone for having me. Now I'd like to start by getting you to think about the last thing that you threw away. It might have been a container you couldn't recycle, a food wrapper, or a pet toy. I want you to think about why you threw that item away. Did it break? Was it no longer useful? Or was it designed to be used just the once? Now think about the materials that were in that product. How many different types do you think it contained? How could these materials have been assembled differently or potentially changed so they weren't destined for the bin? Next slide, please, Lauren. Most of the goods we use in our lives today are designed to follow a linear trajectory, where we take resources from the ground to make products that we use often once, and when they are no longer wanted or needed, we then throw them away. This linear system comes at a great cost, as it is rapidly consuming our planet's finite resources and degrading the very ecological systems that support us. Next slide, please. But the good news is this system is changing, and it's changing for the better. Next slide, please. This change agenda is called the circular economy. It's a new way of doing things that emulates nature's cycles to eliminate the concept of waste and retain more value from the resources available. It's also a system that can be designed to be regenerative and build back natural capital. This shift to our system is one that businesses everywhere across all industries are actively building upon. So how can you take advantage of this shift? Next slide, please. The secret lies in thinking circular with your business or business idea. Opportunities lie where you can identify ways to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. Next slide, please. We can design out waste by making better design choices to innovate and make products to be modular so that they can be disassembled, to be durable and repaired, to be adaptable for different uses over its life, and at the end of its usable life, to be compostable and recyclable. Next slide, please. Good Eddie is a great example of this. They've redesigned the takeaway coffee cup to be one that you can eat, just like an ice cream cone. This is a disruption to the linear model that leads to 2.7 million disposable coffee cups being sent to landfill in Australia every day. Next slide, please. We can also look for ways that we can keep materials and products in use for longer, at the highest utility possible. This is predominantly achieved through changing the way that we offer goods and services. We can redesign business models to provide access to goods instead of ownership, products as a service where you pay for performance, offer resale and secondhand options, offer rental and sharing options, and provide channels to repair, reuse, and remanufacture goods. Next slide, please. Arend designs and makes furniture to be modular and repairable. They then offer this furniture as a service, renting it on a needs basis to offices. This maximises the utilisation of their products, and they are in control to actively maintain the product as it moves between users. At the end of the product's life, materials can be remanufactured and recycled. This is a disruption to the linear model, where office furniture is underutilised and around 300 tonnes of furniture goes to landfill every year. Next slide, please. And finally, you can identify opportunities that not only do less bad, such as making less waste, but actively do more good to rebuild and regenerate the health of our planet and people. The key here is to think what happens next with what you use to create your product or service. Can you remove toxins and replace with safer alternatives? Can you use renewable energy? And can you make products in ways that at the end of their life They actively feed and nourish the waterways and soils. Next slide, please. For example, grate wrap. Take potato waste to make a fully compostable cling wrap that composts within 180 days, leaving no toxins behind. This is a lot quicker than the linear plastic cling wrap option that takes over 1,000 years to break down, and it does leave toxins behind that pollute our planet. Next slide, please. So if you're new to the circular economy and want to learn more about it, I highly recommend you visit the Planet Arc ACE Hub and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website, where you can find all the resources you need to go from a beginner to an expert. Or if you've got a project that you're ready to action, or you want to keep up to date with what's happening in the circular economy in Victoria, I recommend you visit the CBIC, spelled CEBIC, and visit us at cbic.vic.gov.au. And come chat to me later in the chat rooms. Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I think that will be a great discussion in the chat room. I was thinking of business ideas. It's about even the opportunity, some of those examples you used of products. We have a society that actively wants to support environmentally responsible, sustainable. You've also encouraged us to think about how to design our businesses, but I saw lots of business opportunities as you were talking, even in services offered in recycling and reusing things. So it should be a great discussion with Emily and Scott later on. Thank you. All right, we're churning through this. This is great. Our next speaker, and health and well-being. This is another big topic. Globally, health and well-being is a very big industry. It's well beyond the public system, and private enterprise is certainly going to play a big role, already does. Our speaker is Vicky Mason, who's the health and wellbeing. Aptly, we named this title for you, Vicky, on your title at the City of Greater Bendigo. And afterwards, Vicky will be supported by Dr. Naomi Maloney from A Life Simply Live Simply, and she is a practitioner out in the region with a number of practices. So you're going to have a good conversation too. But first, we're going to be inspired by Vicky. Handing over to you.
Thank you. So I don't know if you know that about 60% of the adults who live in Loddon Campaspe region are overweight or obese. Only 1 in 8 of us eat the recommended amount of vegetables, and only 1 in 2 eat the recommended amount of fruit. Just over 50% are physically active according to what we need to be, and about 20% of our population report high or very high levels of psychological distress. And sadly, about 20% of our prep age children are vulnerable, as measured by the Australian Early Childhood Development Census. We sort of explored some of this in doing the active living census across Loddon Campaspe, which we surveyed 25,000 people across Loddon Campaspe to find out what it was that was stopping them from being healthy. What is it that's getting in the way? And they told us about things like lack of knowledge, cost barriers, access to services, time barriers. So I guess I thought about this and I thought, well, what opportunities does that create for startups? So obviously there's the health professionals and there's a range of those, but there is a whole lot of sort of emerging opportunities. So we've all had contacts recently from people who are offering coaching services, whether in person or digitally, to help us. Many of us know what we should be doing, but we need a bit of motivation along the way, or we don't have the skills. So we live in nuclear families now. We don't have people who teach us to parent. Many people can't cook. So just some basic sort of skills. I wish there was someone out there who would just give me a shopping list and a set of recipes, and I go buy my food and I know what to cook all week, because I'm too busy to do that really well. So, and we've seen things like there is a need for healthy food, and we're seeing farmers markets going from strength to strength. So there is a market there for healthy, nutritious food that is accessible and easy to use. With the market around disability and aged care, there is more and more opportunity for private providers to step into that space and assist and register with those sorts of agencies. Earlier, we heard about digital and digital inclusion, and while it's great Bendigo Telco is giving us the access, there's more to digital inclusion than access. There's people who need to help us to learn to use this technology and to give us programs that are easy to use. That's the direct stuff, but then there's indirect. So during this period, it's become really obvious to me that a lot of the people who work in sort of trying to promote community health and wellbeing don't have good marketing and communication skills. We're using a lot more social marketing now, use of video, and it strikes me that the commercial sector's been selling things for a long time. How do you help us sell health and wellbeing to our community so that they take up the opportunities? What are the digital tools that we can use to drive behaviour change? So we've just put in a range of outdoor fitness equipment across the region, but how do people learn how to use it? It's a great marketing opportunity. Go down the street, it's not that costly. Here's an app and a QR code that you scan. You know, you learn how to use this equipment so that it actually helps you and preferably doesn't injure you. Coaching skills for practitioners. So, you know, we've all been taught to work and tell people what to do, but how do we coach them to do the right thing? And there's a lot of people with coaching skills in other sectors that can help us with behaviour change. We've talked a bit about workforce tonight. There is a huge workforce shortage in all aspects of health and wellbeing, whether it's in the area that I work around, prevention, or it's in the health professions, or it's in people that you wouldn't immediately think of that impact your health, like environmental health and health protection. So there's opportunities there, but there's opportunities too for people to be entrepreneurial and bringing together groups of workforce so that we have like agencies for skills in our region instead of having to reach out to state-based organisations or national organisations. And finally, data management and analytics has been mentioned tonight by a couple of people, and you know, we need to strengthen our capacity to do that so we don't spend people's money on things that don't have an impact. So helping the helpers as well as actually reaching out and selling products and services to the wider community are things that I'd thought of. As someone, I have to admit, works in the public. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. But your overarching knowledge of the data and obviously the region will be very useful. And Vicky and I served on a health board together, so I have the utmost respect. And Naomi will bring that private practitioner aspect to that. And health and wellbeing, it's not just hospitals, health, you know, it's fitness industry. It is a very large sector and lots of opportunities there. It is certainly one of the big ones to watch. So thank you for that. That will be a great conversation. All right, now, increasing food chain value. This was another tough one, and I thought, who can I throw this at? And who better than a farmer, a fifth generation farmer from Pyramid Hill, but he's also been the president of the Victorian Farmers Federation. He's currently the chair of Melbourne Market Authority. And I think I saw on Peter Tui's CV that he's also a director of the Victorian Ports Authority. So with his finger in so many pies and listening in so many conversations over the decades, I thought, who better than Peter Tui to lead this conversation? So I'm going to hand over to you, Peter, to hear your thoughts on how can we increase food chain value. You grow it and you sell it at the markets and you export it, but have you thought about how to increase the food chain value? Welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much, Kerry, and thanks everybody for taking the time to be part of this webinar, basically. So, look, I'm being a little bit more specific, I suppose, and looking at one production system where there is a real gap in the market. So, sheep production is a huge industry in central Victoria. Doesn't matter what part of Victoria you lie in, it's everywhere, and there's a huge number sold at the Bendigo sale yards, Ballarat sale yards, Hamilton sale yards, and Wagga. So, there's a lot of opportunity there. So there's not enough, I suppose, what we call technical services. When the government brought in and mandated electronic identification tags, it was a great step forward for animal producers or sheep producers to make use of this technology to improve their systems. And it was brought in basically so for traceability, but there's an opportunity for producers to improve their welfare choices as well as improve productivity. Simple things like, how to manage the enterprise. I mean, farmers' enterprises now have grown dramatically over time, with farm managers often time poor and combined with labour shortages, unable to utilise the technologies available to them. Same with the smaller farmers. They really struggle because often they've got other jobs and they just don't have the expertise or the time or the money to invest in some of this technology. So to me, there's an opportunity, a gap in the market for somebody to fill that. Look, and some of the things you can do just with better sheep handling systems, multiple uses such as pregnancy scanning, the single or multiple births, eye muscle scanning that gives you genetic gain, weighing and drafting of genetic and to improve your genetic gain that way with individual data will help maternal use selection. And there's a lot of things that you can go on from there. There's a myriad of equipment out there and electronic options to do these tasks, but we're all confused by how much there is there and who to go to for that support. There is just not enough serious independent technical support and advice for this sort of equipment, as well as the many management options available to use this to get for farmers and producers to get the best out of this equipment. Advice on programs or equipment and models to purchase, as well as repairs or backup service, should be part of a service that somebody could jump in and do. The possibility for once or multiple times a year to use contract services and including labour, because we all know how short labour is, would be a good option. The service could also supply the equipment for hire, including sheep handling equipment and auto drafting, scales and tag readers, all really good stuff. Flexibility is the key to me. Convenience and productivity improvements, the aim. But some of the productivity gains can be from weighing ewes before joining to make sure they are at a premium weight for mating. This will allow the drafting of the ewes that need more feed or just to remove those poor performing ewes. Fine-tuning lambing to do better manage paddock feed and multiple births. Split multiples and singles into separate feed situations as to not over-fatten single-bearing mothers and hopefully prevent lambing difficulties. And also put the ewes carrying multiple lambs onto better nutrition as well as reducing flock size to better manage the lambing. Managing flock size for lamb marking. Simple. Scan ewes and then scan them again later. So you get early lambers, later lambers, so you condense your lambing. So it's a simple and easy production system. People often laugh at me because I do a split scanning, but it makes it so much easier for handling your stock, paddock-wise, nutrition-wise. Doesn't matter whether you've got merino ewes or crossbreds, whether they're joined to merinos or terminal size. You can scan for eye muscle depth and fat depth. This will give an EBV, which is estimated breeding value. This will help the producer to give an opportunity to increase the productivity of the sheep in his flock by removing the poor performers again. Why carry them on? You want sheep that produce well and good quality, so you need to look at not just running an average flock, you want to run a top flock. Auto weighing and drafting of lambs for sale will eliminate the guesswork out of sales sheep that go for sale either over hooks or at the market. This puts the producer in control because quite often you go to market, you're only having a guess at the weight. The buyer's having a guess at the weight. When you do it yourself and you know the weigh and you can auto draft, you know exactly what product you've got and what you should be getting. So you can actually sell them better over the hooks and get a premium price or know where to put your base price when it goes through the market. So you're not at the whim of the buyers on the day at the sale yards. Again, Central Victoria has huge numbers of sheep producers. Many of these farmers do not have the equipment or the expertise to capitalise on the use of the IDs. There's a great opportunity there for me. Simple things. Technology is a way forward for many different food production systems, and I've just talked about one. Certainly in the chat room, I'm happy to talk about others, but I just thought the specifics, which I can point out quite easily, where you can gain benefits, economies of scale, and just using by somebody being in that market gap and filling that and helping the producers out there. I think I've done that very quickly. Thanks, Kerry.
You've churned through, you've just educated everyone on sheep farming, Peter. Well done. And if you thought sheep farming was simple and easy, you've just realised it's a lot more complicated. The farmers of today have to use technology, and Peter's alluded they'd love some support in that. They could always do better, but it's highly sophisticated, our farming systems, and you've just demonstrated just the complexities of one particular industry. But there's a whole range of industries out there across the region, and certainly a good conversation to have there. Now, you'll be supported in the chat room. The chair will be Lisa Gerbasoni, who's a senior policy advisor with the Victorian Farmers Federation. She's also a graduate of the Loddon Murray Community Leadership Program, so she knows our region very well. And yeah, I'm sure you can explore lots of food chain value startup opportunities, but thank you. Certainly a lot of services that you mentioned there, and service industry is a big part of our startup economy. So thank you, Peter, that was great. All right, now we are up to our final topic before we go into the breakout rooms. And this is a topic that is close to my heart: small town revitalisation, and also touching on the opportunities that present for startup businesses through train stops. We know that some small towns are having their train stops reinstated, and this is changing the dynamics of those towns. But it's even got more to that. But I'm going to let our speaker, Luke Spiegvogel, he's the co-owner of the Newham General Store. He's also a graduate of the Loddon Murray Community Leadership Program, so he knows our region well. And he'll be supported in the chat room by Councillor Janet Pearce from the Macedon Range Council, also a graduate. I feel like I'm stacking the graduates up all of a sudden, but that's just the way it's panned out. So we have a bit of a Macedon Rangers presence in this last segment. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Luke. Thank you for joining us.
Hold on. There we are. I note also, Kerry, that we're a bit ahead of schedule, so I'll try and sort that out for you in the air as well. Kerry has alluded, I'm a co-owner of the Newham General Store, among other things. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about our experience there, and I guess our focus on what we call our live local ethos, and also touch on some of the work that we're doing around regional connectivity, and some of our thinking around that. And as part of that, we'll also touch on the opportunities that these generate, that these things do to generate and capture value, both in our existing conditions in the COVID environment, and those that we hope and see emerging in the not too distant future. So look, we bought the store really for the main reason it's a really important local asset that people use a lot locally and depend on, especially in the COVID environment, and it just wasn't serving that purpose. So yeah, we went ahead and bought primarily a hospitality business in the depths of COVID uncertainty, much to the horror of my father-in-law, I'm sure. But we also recognised that there was an opportunity both now and into the future to better showcase our local producers that we're great supporters of. And also when I talk about generating value, I sort of see that beyond the economics. So I guess an example of that is today a local school mum with her kids on school holidays came in and said, look, I'm so glad that you've taken this on. And while we all know it must be tough at the moment, I really feel like Newham's got its spark back. And for me, that's a big part of why we did it. I think there's those economic opportunities, but there's also just that the catalyst that I think that small business can be in regional areas. So live local, it's a hashtag we use on Instagram a little bit, but beyond that, I think it's a prism in which we approach a lot of our business decisions, in that we've stripped out a lot of the sort of the more metro produce and some of the imported stuff, and are really focused on promoting our local producers. And yeah, a lot of them are just great at growing and making stuff. And so what we tend to do is try and find ways of investigating how we can showcase that, and how we can help them to facilitate new markets. And we're also investing and partnering to help manage their growth through the store, which, if you've been to the Newham General Store, it's not a massive operation, but we also see it as a bit of a gateway to a lot of these wineries and producers locally. And with those local procurement relationships, look, we just see so much reward in that, both from the suppliers themselves, but also consumers. People will seek us out because they know that we're supporting local product. And so we're trialing things like, in a COVID environment, we're doing some remote meet your makers. And in lockdown, we offered really sort of a quasi cellar door for a lot of our local wineries as an essential service. We just stock all their wine, and so they would direct people into us to come and get a coffee, grab your milk and bread, and also a great Shiraz for a rainy night like tonight. And just to sort of quantify that a little bit, one of the first decisions that we made was to get rid of our Metro coffee supplier and switched it to Motorbean in Malmesbury. And within a month, the coffee sales had tripled, and we're on track to double that again. And it's, the guys come in twice a week. They make sure we've got fresh beans. They'll give us a fancy barista on the weekend sometimes to do the coffee art and train our guys. And they just support us to grow, knowing that, that 15 or 20 kilos a week of their coffee that we're doing out of lockdown can grow to be 30 or 40 kilos. So it's, we're really in it together, quite literally. Now, when the other thing that we've looked a lot at is our connectivity. So I guess that there's a few aspects to that, and I think there's great power in the regional story and the product that we have, both for visitation but also for export of produce. So we try and tell that story as well as we can via social media, but we also try to encourage visitation and I guess different ways of locking that in. And I guess one of the questions that we're always asking is, how do we physically get our consumers to our offerings, and in turn our producers? So how do we engage them to engage with us, and then in turn sort of go out to these producers and introduce them to a broader audience? And I think we look at the reverse of that as well. How do we, once we've created those relationships with consumers, how do we then get those products to them if they're locked down in metro and so forth? And so that's, I think, one of the big opportunities that we've recognised now is just sort of those pivots that we can help people soften the blow of lockdowns and those sorts of things, but also continue to keep the wheels turning here. So I think that the power in the regional and local story is something that we're very big on, especially to the couple of million people that are an hour or so down the Calder corridor. Look, we sort of see that they're going to be looking to stretch their legs in the not too distant future, and so we're now looking at how do we get the 100,000 visitors a year to Hanging Rock that drive up and then they drive home again. How do we get them to drop in for a bottle of wine or our world-renowned Newman sandwich? So if you're in Newham, drop in for a Newman. It's world leading. So I think that's really sort of where we're at, and where we see the opportunity. It's connecting our local producers to both local consumers, but also those visitors, and then potentially flow on markets from there. I think just in the short term, we've gone from inheriting the store with 1 staff member, we now have 7, including a chef. And that's in probably some of the more tough, challenging existing conditions. And so as we have an eye to that emerging conditions, we also see that now's a really good time to invest and make sure that we identify that risk of not being able to maintain our service levels when we get as busy as we think we're going to be. So, we've got to leverage our capacity and our capabilities, and a lot of ways sort of act as a catalyst of sorts, and just, put our money where our mouth is and have a crack.
Great. Thank you. Well, you've started off a big conversation there, Luke, and I love the collaborative approach. You're just demonstrating what can be done to support other businesses. And I think that is the key. It's not just tourists, it's also this regional migration and those that choose to live in a rural town, how they could be encouraged to look at startup opportunities and what's the right mix for that town. But it could be a business that also has a global market. It may not even be related to the local community. So lots of things to discuss there, but thank you for sharing your story. We all want to come and have one of those famous,
it's the Newham Reuben. We call it the Newben.
Reuben. Yeah.
It's coming to postcards real soon. So tune into Channel 9 on that. But the other thing I'd sort of add is along with the train stops, I think there's great opportunity in the region to sort of leverage things like we've talked about the rail trails a little bit, just those reasons for people to be here. And once we can sort of leverage those, I think there's just going to be flow-on opportunities for small business.
Absolutely. It's a lifestyle choice as well as where we maybe start a business or get employed. So fantastic. And I know Janet will have a lot to add to that conversation in the chat room. So great topic of discussion. Thank you. All right, now we are to the point where I'm going to introduce Grant Downey from Innovaction, and he's been working with us on the Startup Central Victoria project, and he's going to explain the next part of this forum and how the chat rooms will work. So welcome, Grant.
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks everyone for presenting just some really interesting insights into the businesses and other activities around the regions. The intent of tonight was really to get people looking at sectors, looking at things that might actually be familiar to them in some ways, and encouraging people to look at them and see different things, see new things. And Luke, your example there of the live local and encouraging people to actually look at things like the general store and see a virtual cellar door for wineries, but that's exactly the sort of thing that we were hoping to be able to talk about tonight. So thank you to all the presenters. Each just to give 2 or 3 minute summary of some of the highlights of the conversation, and especially calling out any opportunities that were identified for new business ideas. So we'll start with robotics, and Windsor, as the chair of the robotics chat room, could you just share with us what's just happened in your room?
Pretty much blew my mind, really.
Fantastic.
I learned more about robotics than I thought I'd ever know. No, it was great. We had about 6 or 8 people in the chat room. Mark did an amazing job talking about Hazeldean and the journey, which allowed others to participate, and we got different perspectives because it's not all about that process, but it can also flow into others. Just underpinning all of it, I suppose, around robotics is, which will be for the other groups, is that connectivity, that wireless, needs to be stable. All these environments need to be supported. So some of the opportunities, some of the things that help support and run robotics, there's obviously the manufacturing of components, and the general feel seems that's all pretty much overseas.
Yeah, right.
So that's a big opportunity to bring that manufacturing back home.
There's also, which was mentioned through all the discussions around data analysis. So it's okay to have all of this technology, but there's that understanding what it's telling you, understanding how to improve it, understanding how to grow with it. So having that data analysis locally in real time and people that can understand your process, not just the numbers, would add immense value. There's programming opportunities. So robots work as part of a production line or an entire process. So you need programmers available to be able to do that. Innovation and design. Then there's a whole thing of the servicing and maintenance. That seems a big opportunity where people are brought in from different states, overseas, those sort of things. And it's a very unique skill set.
Yeah, right. So some really good ideas came out of the conversation. That sounds really promising. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glenn and 100 Gig, what happened in your room?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. And we had a great session in our room, and really, I suppose the one big thing popped up, and it worked perfectly into Windsor's, which is about data. So really about data, and data, the whole ecosystem around data, and being able to provide support to businesses. So for us, it was really big, and thinking about that even broader, digital as a sector. It does not really have a sector. It supports a lot of sectors, but there's actually opportunities, significant opportunities for that whole sector to grow within a regional context and support a whole range of things, including, all the topics we talked about today, whether that be civic supports, so civic systems, health, agriculture, food, manufacturing, construction, mining, environment, things where we've got really good strengths in the region and how we have to measure them. And it was really great to hear even reiterate that stuff around the circular economy and carbon, around actually understanding its impacts into the future. So you've got to know that stuff to be able to prove it. So it was really good. And the analytics side, the ubiquitous future of work was discussed a little bit in terms of digital and the need for skills and demand side stuff. That was really interesting around education and what's required there. Another fourth bit was really around like all the data stuff, analytics, sharing, visualization, insight. So that stuff, which leads into the AI and robotics and ML. So again, really machine learning back into Windsor stuff. And the last bit was really about thinking about it more broadly, opportunity about literacy, equity, and connectivity around those key bits and pieces. So that's how we sort of finished up with sort of 6 key areas, but really focused on one, which was data.
And the whole, in terms of not just collecting it, but analysing it and producing insights, which you all talked about. Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Supply chain, Paul Chapman, what happened in the supply chain room?
Well, we solved it all. There's no doubt about it.
Of course.
We had a small group, but very passionate group. And at the end of the line, we found that all of the speakers applied, what they were saying is applied to the built environment. And the supply chain and the built environment is absolutely critical to everywhere in Australia. We know sovereign manufacturing is the key. Sovereign skills is the key. So with the challenge there, and a great challenge there to solve, is how do we get people to do both of those? And it focuses on the kids. So Pete Trawalla was explaining about a terrific program. They've got connecting youth to local industry. We have a very strong focus in our discussion around local, as you heard from Mick's speech. But at the end of the day, it came down to something that wasn't spoken about a great deal earlier tonight, and that was the creative industries. Our solution here is in digital messaging and the creative thinking around how do we convince kids' parents, it's not the kids, how do we convince kids' parents digitally and on the social media platforms that the built environment's going to offer extraordinary opportunities forever and a day, as does manufacturing. So our message to this, if I were going out to a bunch of kids having a hackathon, we'd be saying, give us a program that's going to change the perception in your eyes of making something.
Fantastic. Oh, sounds like some really interesting conversations.
And
nice
the last
work.
thing, if I can, was we wanted to get that message across that whatever the innovators and the inventors and the kids starting off, they should be very optimistic and positive about it. So get that message out there.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Paul. Okay, to circular economy and Scott Bryant. What happened in the circular economy room?
Well, we selfishly started off a little bit like Glenn and data in terms of you could apply a circular economy lens to just about every conversation this evening. It's typically made of material or consumed, so what's the opportunity there? But I think most absurdly, going slightly absurdist and perhaps on the creativity side of things, we started off with an interesting conversation about what one actual region that's generated big opportunity for, at the end of the day, everyone thinks, if you're composting it, that is a great outcome, much better than going into landfill. But from a circular economy perspective, what's higher value? What can actually generate business opportunity from a material or a resource that would otherwise be considered waste? So we started off on hair before moving on to perhaps what would be more generally synonymous with regional Victoria in terms of opportunities coming out of feedstock that's also considered a bit of agricultural waste. So Andrew from La Trobe Uni was touching on opportunities that they've supported in the past through similar accelerators in terms of how can you actually create valuable products that displace, in this case, single-use plastics by using waste from agriculture. So effectively turning what would otherwise be, to an extent, compost on the land, and what can you do to turn that into an even more valuable product before it then gets turned back to compost. And
fantastic.
And I guess from there it sort of seamlessly transitioned to a couple of people members on our call were touching on, well, I guess linking in with the startup opportunities is I guess the great support that exists in the region to actually support those ideas. So from the La Trobe University and their technological expertise there through to the Bendigo Tech School, which touches, I think, on Paul's point earlier in terms of how do you get people enthused in this space, is actually, well, how can we set them chat? How can we use the Bendigo Tech School and the kit that they have there to actually, I guess, set challenges for that, startups or bigger businesses are looking to deal with. How can we
fantastic.
What they have.
Oh, so, brilliant. Yeah, look, some great conversations happening in all the rooms, clearly. So brilliant. All right, so to health and well-being. Vicky, what happened in your room? Have you got yourself on mute still, Vicky? Oh. Hello? I think you're on mute. Oh, there we go. Now you're off mute.
We
can't hear you.
Yeah. That's okay. Maybe we'll move on to the next one and try again a little bit later, Vicky.
Yeah, I'm not sure quite what's happened, Vicky. I do want to hear back from your room, but let's go to food chain value and Lisa Gervasoni. Lisa, what happened in your room?
Our room, we had quite a wide-ranging discussion. There's obviously a lot of opportunities within the full range of agricultural commodities. But we then started to sort of discuss some of those support needs. So how to de-risk things, where are the education gaps, where are the what are the general principles around where those gaps are? So, for example, in education and training needs, one of the things that came up was the need to, probably start to modernise some of that training. And in the current sort of Cert 3 and 4, there was very little content on something like hydroponics, which is obviously a growth industry. So how do we look at those opportunities, and in tertiary and higher education as well.
Yep.
The consumer trends. So one of the examples was the desire for, touch-free harvesting. So how technology could be driving that. At the moment, there's always labour shortages in agriculture, but at the moment with COVID, that's even, more critical, and that the opportunities seem to be in the 3 Ps: picking, packing, and planting.
Yes.
So there are, and each commodity will be slightly different, but we also did talk about, say, grains production, for example, and GPS ag. A lot of people have very smart tractors now, but not everyone can use that very smart tractor to its full capacity. So that was, sort of maybe a bad analogy, but what is
no data and insights? It's a segue.
Correct. What are the what's the new modern look of someone like an agronomist? How do you have the sort of the technology kind of agronomist for you, which again goes back to education and training. And for, I suppose, the startup example, obviously there's a lot of things. So how do you know who you can partner with to trial things? How do you know what's been done there? So obviously having the producers, having sort of pathways to RDCs, and potentially there's a role for things like university and even AgVic about let's scoping up what are these opportunities and how we can sort of get those partnerships happening.
Yeah.
So
well, it's one of the main things that we're hoping is going to happen out of Startup Central Vic, is that we get some collaboration between all of these people who are starting to have great conversations. So thank you, Lisa. That's a great summary. All right, let's go to Janet to hear about the train stops, but then we'll circle back. Chris has offered to report back on for Vicky, who's having problems. But let's first go to Janet. Janet Pierce, what happened in the small town revitalisation room?
Thanks. Well, we had some lovely discussions. We thought about the, being regional and rural. There was, we went back first thinking of jobs for the future, and it came out. There was discussions on tech, on coding clubs that are already got interest within, some of the shires as well, but programming and everything. But therefore, because of that you're able to work remotely now, to bring that in wherever you work, you're going to need to have the support around it, the infrastructure around it. We talked about, so youth is a key factor in the change as well. We spoke about the change of when youth have their networks growing up in regional and rural, and it used to be that they would go off to get their education and out, more down to metro or to other areas, and then come back when they were looking to have a family or settle down. Now there's a bit of a change that people are coming back early after their education, simply because their networks and where they grew up and everything is there. So to harness that, and if they've got the skills in the coding, we were joking and saying, Luke was saying how the Macedon Ranges could become the Silicon Ranges. So that you could talk, and we were going to include Bullock as well, because we had people from Bullock in our group. But the big thing was on connecting. So if we could see that all the areas that we've talked about can all be supply chain, digital, health and wellbeing, increased food chain, are all sitting there. And back to Luke's discussion on connecting the producers with the retailers en masse across our regions. So we were talking about, for instance, there's a Central Victorian Brewers Alliance and the Calder Ale Trail, but that's about overarching cooperation of businesses. And to do that, you have to, and to be encouraging locally, you have to do with, and it was rated as a quote, every door is a warm door, so that you're passing on the opportunities throughout to all the other around you. And even that's not even in your small town, it can be in the next town or on that whole region that you're connecting to.
That's one of the big things with Startup Central Vic, and Kerry really emphasised it at the start of the session. We're absolutely thinking about Central Vic all the way from Macedon to Echuca. And so the idea of trying to get some of these connections and collaborations going across the region is really exciting. So super. Thank you, Janet. And we'll go to Chris now. Thank you, Chris, for looks like Vicky still can't quite get a headset working. Thank you, Chris. What happened in your room, Chris, which was health and wellbeing?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. So health and wellbeing is obviously a very, very big topic, wide-ranging, diverse from all angles and all perspectives. So that about sums up our conversation in terms of what we covered. We covered a lot,
everything.
But in particular, we jumped through, and there was one thing that linked it all, though, and I think we've said that word probably the most out of everything tonight. We spoke about fire and Dan, who I think's had to jump off, but a great little business that he's starting up around people's attitudes and behaviours around bushfires was really interesting to talk through that. Women's health was another topic we spoke through about the birth experience and people needing support, particularly now more than ever with COVID. Support through that journey and that experience pre and post birth. We spoke about women's retreats and again that need for connectivity amongst women at any time, but particularly now where women especially are wearing so many hats at home. They're a teacher, they're a wife, they're a mum, they're everything at once. Which is obviously putting a lot of pressure on women in particular. We spoke about connectivity at libraries and the role that plays, and that's from a social perspective, but also a digital perspective too. And we spoke about disability services and being able to connect people that have needs, special needs, into the right services at the right time in the right way. So that was really good from Tim as well. But there was one thing that just covered it all off, and that was connectivity. So
connectivity,
which I think we'd all agree with after the last 18 months is really important, being able to connect with each other and get that support where and when it's needed, in whether that's digitally or in person.
Yeah, fantastic. And hopefully there's more connectivity face-to-face in the months ahead. It's just been one of the biggest impacts of the last 18 months, is that everything has either gone online or not happening. So great. Well, look at all those brilliant conversations. That's really very encouraging and absolutely what we were hoping would happen, that when you heard a little bit about these different sectors in the presentations at the start, that it would spark some thinking about, well, what are some of the extra services that we might turn into a business or some sort of a service offering. So you had great conversations in there, and well done to everyone. I'll pass back to Kerry.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you so much to all our speakers, our chairs, and everyone that participated in that conversation. It's just wonderful, and I'd just like to remind you, this is the first of many conversations, and I'm just so pleased that you're all working out. This is about connecting not just our town, not just our shire. It's a regional conversation, and that is the purpose of Startup Central Victoria, to take these conversations to add value to what you're already doing in your communities. So we'd love for you to give us your feedback. We're going to put the link in the chat box, because we want to know what worked well and what could be better and what you'd like us to organise in the future. We'd also like you to think about, maybe you were inspired tonight about a particular idea. You might have brought it to the table, or you might have heard it from somebody else. It doesn't matter. But maybe you want to get a team together, or you might know someone in your community that would really benefit from that learning experience. Can I tell you again, this is free. It is an opportunity. Please encourage those that you think will benefit to take advantage of this. And obviously the Accelerator Program, we have 15 places, which could be 15 teams or and an individual might like to apply, but 15 places, business ideas to really get driven forward. And that will be a competitive space. We want you to apply early so you don't have less chance of missing out, because next year more people will know about it. So everybody that's been here tonight is in a privileged position that you will know that these opportunities exist. So tell those in your circle, in your community, that you think will benefit, and obviously it could be yourself. So once again, thank you everyone, and a final thank you to Lauren, who has been putting up these slides and helping us get all the technology together. And I look forward to actually chatting further with everyone that's connected tonight to help you progress your ideas. So thank you once again, everyone. We will put the recordings up on our website, so we'll let you know when that's happened. You can go back and check out some of these discussions. And obviously, if someone that wasn't able to make it, you can refer them to that resource. So thank you once again, everyone. Have a good evening. You've done magnificently well. Thank you for your participation.